I was compelled to make this video because I was reading um, a little bit more about the issues with an actor by the name of Nate Parker. Because there was a movie that was recently released called The Birth of a Nation. And so I'm going to get right down into this video here. Um, it's talking about the movie is a depiction of a slave um, who was a preacher. It's the insurrection of Nat Turner in 1831, and the book that I'm reading from is From Slavery to Freedom: A History of African Americans. So I'm going to start reading it. Revolts or conspiracies to revolt persisted down to 1865. They began with the institution and did not end until slavery was abolished. It can therefore be said that they were a part of the institution, a kind of bitterness that whites had to take along with the sweetness of slavery. As the country was turning to Jeffersonian and Republicanism at the beginning of the 19th century, many people believed that a new day had arrived for the common person. Some blacks, however, felt that they would have to force their new day by breaking away from slavery. In Henrico County, Virginia, they resolved to revolt against the institution under the leadership of Gabriel Prosser and Jack Bowler. For months, they planned a desperate move, gathering clubs, swords, and the like for the appointed day. On August 30, 1800, over 1,000 slaves met 6 miles outside of Richmond and began to march on the city, but a violent storm almost routed the insurgents. Two slaves had already informed the whites, and Governor Monroe, acting promptly, called out more than 600 troops and notified every militia commander in the state. In due time, scores of slaves were arrested and 35 were executed. Gabriel Prosser was captured in late September, and after he refused to talk to anyone, he was executed. Whites speculated extravagantly over the number of slaves involved in this major uprising. The estimates ran all the way from 2,000 to 50,000. The large numbers, together with the total disregard slaves seemed to have their own lives, caused the whites to shudder. The high ground that slaves took in maintaining silence added to the stark terror of the whole situation. When one was asked what he had to say, he calmly replied, "I have nothing more to offer than what General Washington would have had to offer, had he have taken or been taken by the British officers and had been put to trial by them. I have ventured my life in endeavoring to obtain the liberty of my countrymen, and am a willing sacrifice to their cause, and I beg as a favor that I may be immediately led to execution. I know that you have predetermined to shed my blood. Why then all this mockery of a trial?" The unrest among slaves, even in Virginia, continued into following years. The plots were reported in Petersburg and Norfolk, and in various places in North Carolina. The later state became so excited that many slaves were lashed, branded, and cropped, and at least 15 were hanged for allegedly implication of conspiracies. In the following years, before the war with England, there were reports of an insurrection up and down the Atlantic seaboard. Conspiracy had crossed the mountains, for in 1810 a plot was uncovered in Lexington, Kentucky. The following year, more than 400 rebellious slaves in Louisiana had to be put down by federal and state troops. At least 75 slaves lost their lives in encounter and in the trials that ensued. There were another uprising in New Orleans in the following year. Following the War of 1812, the efforts of slaves to revolt continued. In Virginia in 1815, a white man by the name of George Boxley decided to attempt to free the slaves. He made elaborate plans, but a slave woman betrayed him and his conspirators. Although Boxley himself escaped, 6 slaves were hanged and another 6 were banished. And when the revolutions of the Latin Americas and the Europes broke out, Americas could not restrain themselves in their praise and support for the fighters of liberty. The South joined in the loud hosannas while slaves watched the movements for the emancipation of the slaves in Latin Americas and the Caribbeans. Perhaps all the developments had something to do with what was the most elaborate, though not the most effective conspiracy of the period, the Denmark Vesey insurrection. Vesey had purchased his own freedom in 1800, and for a score of years he had made a respectable living as a carpenter in Charleston, South Carolina. He was a sensitive, liberty-loving person and was not satisfied with the enjoyment of his own relatively comfortable existence. He believed in equality for everyone and resolved to do something for his slave brothers and sisters. Over a period of several years, he carefully plotted. He plotted to collect weapons, 250 pike heads and bayonets and 300 daggers. Vesey also sought assistance from Haiti. So he plotted, in other words, a revolt, and he chose his assistants to do this. So I'm backtracking. He set the second Sunday of July in 1822 for the day of the revolt. So this is really going on one account of a revolt, and I'm going to jump quickly over here to this one that is based on the movie of the insurrection of Nat Turner in 1831. It goes on to say, upon the occasion of the solar eclipse in February 1831, Nat Turner decided that the time had come for him to lead his people out of bondage. He selected the 4th of July as the day, but when he became ill, he postponed the revolt until he saw another sign. On August 13th, when the sun turned to a peculiar greenish blue, he called the revolt for the August of the 21st. He and his followers began killing Nat Turner's slave master, Joseph Travis, and his family. In rapid succession, other families fell before the blows of blacks. Within 24 hours, 60 whites had been killed. The revolt was spreading rapidly when the main group of blacks was met and overpowered by the state and federal troops. More than 100 slaves were killed in the encounter, and 13 slaves and 3 Negroes were immediately hanged. Turner was captured on October 30th, and in less than 2 weeks, on November the 11th, he was executed. So, the South was completely dazed by the Southampton uprising. The situation was grossly exaggerated in many communities, and some reports were that whites had been murdered by the hundreds in Virginia. Small wonder that several states felt it necessary to call special sessions of legislature to consider this an emergency. So most states strengthened their slave codes, and citizens literally remained awake nights waiting for slaves to make another revolt or a break. The uprisings continued. 1835, several slaves in Monroe County, Georgia, were hanged or whipped or beat to death because of implications of a conspiracy. In the following decades to come thereafter, there were several uprisings in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and in 1853, a serious revolt in New Orleans involving 2,500 slaves was aborted by the informing of a free black. In 1856, the Maroons in Bladen and Robinson's counties, North Carolina, went on a warpath and terrorized the countryside. Up until and throughout the Civil War, slaves demonstrated their violent apathy for slavery by continuing to rise up against it. So, this movie is really controversial, and a lot of people are really, really riveted about the fact that they're bringing up the actor's past, which I'm not trying to say that his past isn't important. It is important to know, you know, the fact that rape is wrong and rape is bad. And so there was an incident that happened in particular with the actor who is playing Nat Turner. In his past, he was involved in a rape charge. And it was in 1999 there was a rape charge. And if you want to look at the whole content of it, it talks about it in in detail on Wikipedia. It gives accounts. I'll just read part of it. It says in 1999, while a sophomore at Penn State University, Parker and his roommate and wrestling teammate Jean Gianni Celestine were accused of raping a fellow Penn State student. The unarmed accuser stated that Parker and Celestine raped her while she was intoxicated and unconscious, and said she was unsure of how many people had been involved. She stated that two harassed her after she pressed charges, and they had hired private investigators who had showed her pictures around campus revealing her identity. Parker was found not guilty on all four counts brought against him. Celestine, who shares a story credit on The Birth of a Nation, was convicted of sexual assault and received a 6 months to one brought against him. Celestine, he received a 6 months to 1 year prison sentence in 2001. Later, it raised to 2 to 4 years per state sentencing guidelines, appealing the case on grounds of ineffective counsel at the first trial. Celestine's initial conviction was overturned in 2005, and he was granted a new trial to rehear the charges. Despite the accuser's willingness to testify at the second trial, prosecutors declined because other witnesses had scattered all over the world. So, in other words, people moved on, moved their separate ways. That happens. On campus of 2001, students raised concerns that race may have influenced Celestine's initial conviction. Celestine is black, as is Parker, while the accuser and all but one of the jurors were white. Via the Women's Law Project, Parker's accuser filed a complaint against the university for failing to protect her from harassment, which was settled in court with Penn State for with Penn State, the university, of $17,500. The alleged harassment consisted of a personal investigator hired by Parker and Celestine's flashing her photos on the campus to let her identity be known and subject to her taunts. There Goes the White Girl Crying Rape is what it's entitled. In 2012, this person who was the victim, or alleged a victim, had committed suicide. So I just read a version of what they had there. So you're seeing clips of The Shame of America. It shows the whole history of slavery, and then you're seeing like a caricature of depiction of Nat Turner. It looks like an old comic version, the way it's drawn, and then you'll see the actual actor's face as he's in character doing Nat Turner. And I read to you about the historical content, and later you will see pictures of the artwork of depictions of who Nat Turner may have looked like and what he may have been like when he led the insurrection during that time period. But the controversy is back and forth. It's like a pendulum that swings back and forth. You have black people who are coming out and support, and then you have some black people who are of non-support because of the rape allegation. Even though he was you know released of all his charges, there was also the question as to they only had one white juror and all the other jurors. Uh, from what I'm hearing, the way they say there were all but one white juror. All the other jurors may have been of color, and it's almost like they're putting into it like a reverse racism type of issue. Then there's the issues of heard scrutiny around males. There's a war on YouTube and on various social media sites among black males and black females, with the fight over independence and women wanting to be independent black women, or feminism and their right to vote, their right to choose, their right pro-life, or con life, whatever. It's like there's fighting back and forth. It's like back and forth, back and forth. And then there's the issue that he's married to a woman that isn't of color, that is supposedly white, or she looks white. Um, when I read her, the last name doesn't sound like a white descent. She sounds like she may be Latina. It says Sarah DeSanto, and I believe it says that he has 6 children. Now, I don't know if that's just with the same woman, or if he has, he may have had other spouses, because I saw some photos of him on images when you Google him where he's with other people. I don't know if that's in movies and whatnot, but he's, he, I don't know him personally to judge him, in terms of, his character. But from what I've been reading, I will say this. I'm just going to say this outright. Rape is wrong. I don't care what color, what background, what nationality you are, rape is wrong. And if you were involved in it, if you were in a place in your life where you were involved in a situation where you made yourself vulnerable, then it's wrong. And if you have paid your dues for it, why should this haunt you? But it will. Think about it. If you put yourself out there to be famous in the public eye, you are going to be haunted by your past. We see that in politics. And this movie is not only a historic depiction of what has happened in history, but it is political. It I will say this, it is political. When you take a stance and you're going to play a character like this, it is highly political and publicized, because think about it. Look at how many people took the time to dig up that actor's information. Look at how many people take the time. What looks like a memorial right here. This might have been a memorial. I heard, when I was looking at another commentator sync on the TYT, the Young Turks, where he mentioned that there were several memorials, and that hate groups or different groups worked to take down memorials or to eliminate memorials because they didn't want to see where these insurrections or where these incidences had occurred. And this right here is talking about the specific insurrection of Nat Turner and how he led the revolt. And so it is very much a part of our history, as is any other issues that come out that have to do with African American history. I implore you to get this book, From Slavery to Freedom, History of African Americans. It's a 7th edition book, and it is by John Hope Franklin and Alfred A. Moss Jr., and it has a lot of information in here that talks about the beginnings, the inner workings of slavery. It talks about the art. It goes into the historical periods of the Harlem Renaissance era. It goes into the music. It goes into the Great Migration to the North of African Americans. It goes through everything in this book, and it's a very excellent a piece of literature. And I really encourage you to look on Amazon, eBay, somewhere, and purchase the book. And you can also see the different accounts of different insurrections. And I just want to mention real quick too that, recently, I don't know if you were paid attention to Michelle Obama when she was at she made the account of the White House being built by slaves, and quickly Bill O'Reilly, he had blasted her, and he made it seem like slaves were well fed and they were well kept, and as if like people enjoyed slavery. Well, this right here will virtually wipe out the notion that people were happy about their present condition of slavery. That is why it is important. I hear people saying that they want to boycott this movie, but let me tell you something. I'm a black female, and I'm a woman, and I'm not extreme when it comes to feminism, but I believe in black women having independence and being strong black women and being able to hold their head up high and be able to raise their children, go to work, get educated, be able to vote and have rights and be able to work jobs and be able to be treated fair. But I do not agree with trying to boycott this movie for the purpose of, oh, he's married to somebody that looks white. Now, I disagree with the videos that have been posted on social media bashing black women. I disagree with all of this rhetoric and all this stuff. 10 reasons, we know who said that. 10 reasons. I don't know if he actually said it, but if he did, I posted a video about that. I disagree with videos saying 10 reasons why you'll date a white woman over black women, and making white women to look like they're hookers, and you're, in one sense, you're trying to make them seem like they're better than black women, but it makes them look like they're not better. They're trashy, and it depicts women in a negative light. I also disagree with this fighting. I really feel like that movie should have been, uplifted, in the sense of that it's a historical time in our history where it shows that slaves fought for freedom, and they did it by any means necessary. And there also a depiction here of a book of Nat Turner if you want to read about the slave rebellion in history. And I'm sure probably now these things are probably a little bit more expensive because now you have all this controversy of that is rolled around him, the issue of the insurrection and then this actor. But let's be honest here. When you bring up issues about slavery, when you bring up issues about inequality of blacks, and blacks being economically handicapped because they've been treated unfairly throughout history, in every arena, you're going to have racist white supremacist groups that are going to do everything in their power to discredit and to boycott movies, literature, anything that they feel that makes them unempowered and makes them look like the terrorists that they really are, or that they were, and that some of these people that are still doing this really are. And this is sad because we're in the year of 2016, we're going on into the year of 2017, and I thought this was a very critical time to bring these things out because we've had a numerous of protests. We've had Black Lives Matter. We've had women of color rallying around black men, but yet we have these videos that are hurtful and harmful to black women. They're all over social media bashing black women, and it's not even white men doing this. And then we have these issues that come up. I'm just going to throw out some issues here. We have the issues of where black men hate feminists, they hate swirlers, they hate black lesbians, or they hate black women, or they hate black single moms. There's all this hate going on. They don't want you to be with they don't want you to be with them, they claim. They don't want to be with you, but then they don't want you to be with anyone else. So if you're with a white man, you're going to get hated on. If you're with some other man, they're hating on him because he wants to be with you. So there's a lot of controversy, and then there's also the issue of religion. People are using religion, to support their hate, towards people of other groups, people of, and then there's, white people who are, they're friends with someone black. They don't think you should be friends with them. They don't think you should be friends with whites, that you should have a relationship with them. Now, I don't know what brought this Nate Parker to the mates that he has. That only him and those individuals know that. But it's not my place to say who he should date and who he should get in a relationship with. Then there's the issue with the Bill Cosby thing. There were a lot of people rallying around that issue. They were in support of his situation. Then you see more and more females coming out in numbers, and at first it looked like it was you just seen white females coming out, and then you started seeing some black females coming out stating what he had done. So we know this is coming from a time period probably in what, 60s, 70s, I'll say 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where he was involved in these alleged accusations of using drugs to knock out women so he could take advantage of them, and that he had a perversive mentality. So there's been a lot of hurt. There's been a lot of anger in the black community among black males with police brutality, among black females and males with the gender wars, among women of color with how they look. And we also have black males that put down their own black females. And so that's why we have Black Girls Rock. I even seen controversy where white people said, why don't we have White Girls Rock? Well, you didn't go through the black experience. So, you might be going through another type of experience, but it definitely isn't the black experience. So that's why we have Black Girls Rock. It's not necessarily just to put down white people. Then we had the whole era in the 70s where there was the pimp, the Mac, the player, the Mac Daddy, and all that. And then we had the whole era with the gangster rap and the video vixens, and then that brings black women of color down. And then not only black women of color, but you've seen those pimps, they also had white women as prostitutes. And so, there's this whole thing where there are some black males that don't even look at females of color or women, period, of value. They don't cherish them and they don't treat them well. So there's a lot of abuse. And like recently there was the movie Surviving Compton with Michelle A, and she talked in depth, and it was like a experience into her past about what abuses she went through with Dr. Dre. And then now that he has something coming out with Apple, they wanted him to clean up his thing. And so there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of controversy. So all of this is meshed together. It's like a boiling point. So here we got the police killings, and from what I've been hearing, I've been seeing, they call them now Blue Klux Klan. I don't know if you've heard that saying. There's a phrase called Blue Klux Klan. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and like you see this woman here, she's all turned up, like, they've got alcohol. I'm sure that they were looking at it at the time as, we're making money, we're making a video. Oh, I'm just doing my job. I just want to get paid. But over time, when you see much of that, they view you as nothing more than like a stripper or a slut or somebody that they can, basically put on the street. And so a lot of that is negative, with among, just women in general, but then black women of color. We get a lot of this. We have had some if you've seen any of my clips that I've posted up of just random women that have had experience. Now, I don't know them personally, but they've had experiences, and all those experiences, if you put them together, it's the same thing like when black people have said they've been abused by the police officers and they've been treated unfairly. Now, within our culture, we have this thing where black women have been mistreated and mistreated unfairly by a number of black males. And you have different women from different places, and they all seem to be saying similar things. So we're not crazy either. So obviously, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hatred, and it's not only outside of the black community, it's within our own group as a whole. And so there's a lot of conversation that needs to be talked about among us. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done. And I really blame it on, instead of blaming each other, I blame a lot of this on what has happened to us prior that brought us here. If you look at all of what has been done to the black family unit, there's been a lot of split ups, there's been a lot of breakups, there's been a lot of conspiracies to break black families apart deliberately. And if they had to use public assistance, if they had to lock black men up and put them in the prison complex, the industrialized prison complex, if they had to frame black men, if they have to shoot them, if they have to pull them apart, that happened even way back in the days. We still have that going on, and this is nothing short of what we've experienced before. Don't be surprised if you don't see anything else happen. But I just thought this was impertinent information, and just check for me later.